Well, another three-game championship week comes to an end as we return for Matchday 33 predictions this weekend. We'll be previewing, predicting and giving our reasons why for all 12 matches across this weekend. And as always, I'll be encouraging you to do exactly the same in the comments below. Give me your predictions for Matchday 33, and if you beat or match my score, you'll get a shout out in the next recap, which will be on Sunday, ahead of a 4-game midweek where a few teams have got a bit of catch up to do. But before we go and get into the action very quickly, a couple of quick thanks. Firstly to you guys, a record number of you got involved with your predictions in this midweek edition. We'll recap those in a minute. And also a thank you to our sponsor HelloFresh, who have supported the channel a number of times now. If you're in the UK, you can get 60% off your first box plus free delivery, 20% off for 2 months and other free gifts as well. You can click the link in the description to help support the channel while doing all of that. It's a brand I've used lots of times and of course I'm always very complimentary of. Would highly recommend them. For now though, let's move back to the championship action and have a recap of what happened in Matchday 32. Because it was a bit of a bonkers midweek. Most of the scorelines, or the outcomes I should say, were fairly predictable, but a lot of the results were very high scoring compared to our predictions. It actually led to one of those weeks where we were all pretty level pegging, most of us between 9 and 11 points overall. I got a perfect score for West Brom's 2-0 win at home to Cardiff, and I picked up 7 other points for correct outcomes as you can see. That took me to a grand total of 10 this match day. But one of you has gone and stolen the show. Let me give a shout out to all of those who matched and beat my score. And also a quick shout out to Steve, one of our regulars, because he only got 9 points, but they were all for correct outcomes. And that was the most of anyone this match day. To get 9 games out of 12 and not beat my score did seem a little harsh, but there's the beauty of the perfect score prediction. Level with me on 10 points was Peter, who actually got 2 perfect scores and only 4 other correct outcomes, but you finished level with me in double figures. Then 5 of you on 11 points, one ahead of me. We've got BPK, Tim, Daniel and Isaac. You all got 11 points with 2 perfect scores. And just edging ahead of you on the same points, but with a 3rd perfect score as well, was Ethan in 2nd place there. And then top of the table, let's all just doff our cap to Lewis, who picked up 16 points, 4 perfect scores, 4 other correct outcomes, and the 2nd highest score of anyone in any match day this season. A massive well done to you. That was an incredible effort. With that out of the way, let's move on to match day 33. Get involved and see if you can beat me this time. I'm a bit full of cold, so we'll keep it short and sweet today as we start with Friday night action. West Bromwich Albion versus Southampton, who are no longer 24 unbeaten. There were warning signs defensively against Huddersfield, and their worst fears were realised away at Bristol City. They got a late consolation, but they were very comfortably beaten in the end. They had a lot of the ball. It was a fairly even game if you look at the stats, but Bristol City were incisive, they took advantage, and they were happy to give up possession, and they did what happened to a few Russell Martin sides earlier this season with Southampton. It was almost like a bit of a step back in time to September, October, but overall, it's been a wonderful run for Southampton. As many have mentioned, it had to end at some point. But what's the reaction going to be? Well, I'm pretty sure the fixture Martin wouldn't have wanted was West Bromwich Albion away. One of the better home teams in the division, in a rich vein of form, and up in 5th place, becoming the best of the rest after that Elite Four. A really comfortable 2-0 win. They did dominate the ball, they had the better chances. Gave up a few towards the end to Cardiff, albeit they didn't really take advantage of them. But overall, West Brom just plodding along nicely. They did okay against Ipswich as well. Of course, Andy Vyman making a bit of an impact now, isn't he? That's a couple of goals in his last 2 home games. So for this one, I'd argue it's a worst nightmare for Southampton. And we saw earlier in the season, when they had a poor run, it became a really poor one. There's a good chance this could be a draw. And it is normally low scoring Friday night football from the Championship. But I'm going to stick my neck on the line early. Let's go for a bold one. I think West Brom might nick it and make it 2 in a row for Southampton. I'm going to go for 2-1. I was mighty close to picking the Championship's favourite scoreline. As we move on to Saturday lunchtime and the other TV game this weekend, Plymouth Argyle are hosting Leeds United. Now for Plymouth, another really decent point, up in 15th now after a home draw against Coventry. Albeit it looked like it was going to be better until the 96th minute. A really important point for the visitors and maybe 2 dropped for Plymouth, but their home form's been very solid. They've always been a threat. and they score goals galore. But as we've mentioned before, they always concede chances. And against Coventry, there was a spell towards the end of the first half where it was just chance after chance. And if they'd taken a couple, it could have been an away win. So for Plymouth defensively, I'm very concerned. And I watched the Leeds game on Tuesday night. My God, they were unbelievable at the start. The first 10 minutes, they could have had a couple of goals before they got their first. They were then just incisive on the counter. Yes, Swansea played into their hands a bit. Tactically, it was a little naive, but what a performance. All of the front three, Somerville, Pirro and Nonto delivering. And in the end, it probably could have been more if Leeds had wanted it to be. A really good effort from them. Plymouth, not a bad side, but defensively for me, they're a bit too suspect. They quite often score, so I'll give them one. I'm going to go for Leeds to win comfortably by 3-1. As we move on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs, and Tony Mowbray continues to face all of his former sides. He's seen off Blackburn, and now he's got Sunderland and Ipswich. It is Birmingham City versus Sunderland. The story of 1-0s for these two sides in midweek. Birmingham won 1-0 at home to Blackburn, a crucial game now at the bottom of the Championship as they got one over on their former manager John Eustace. And to be fair, it was a very good performance. They had a lot of the ball, a lot of shots. They really got into good positions, but quite often at times just taking a few too many chances from 20-25 yards rather than finding those incisive openings. But those patterns of play will come in time. And against a Blackburn team that sat a little bit deeper, you can understand why it was harder for Birmingham to break them down. For Sunderland, after that promising second half against Plymouth in midweek, a bit of a drab display away at Huddersfield Town. Matty Pearson obviously has become very potent for the host, but for Sunderland, it was the defending of aerial positions. They did have a great chance to make it a draw. They had a lot of set pieces, a lot of good positions, but the delivery just wasn't quite there. And in the end, it will probably be seen as 3 points drop, but you look at that Championship race, 5 sides between 6th and 10th place Sunderland separated by a point. They're certainly not in a bad position going into this one. But it is a very difficult game to call because Birmingham will take confidence from ending that drought. 3 defeats in a row, but they were all away from home. And we know how poor Birmingham's away form has been. At home, they've been solid. Under Mowbray, they've been okay, but without having much of an attacking threat. And for Sunderland, they do rely quite heavily on moments of magic from the likes of Bellingham, Clark, from 20-yard strikes, from something a bit special, rather than opening up teams. So I can actually see this being a pretty poor affair. I can maybe see this being a game where teams are resorting to long shots and crosses quite often. It comes down to who defends them better, and I can't really pick. So at the moment, I'm going to play safe despite Sunderland's poor recent away form, and I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1 at St Andrews. As we move on to another two sides that had very differing midweeks, it is Bristol City versus QPR. A missed opportunity for the visitors at Stoke City. They could have climbed out the relegation zone, but they were done by a late first half goal. And to be honest with you, they were pretty poor. It was back to the old Cifuentes way of keeping the ball, but not really creating much, not really opening Stoke up. And in the end, they didn't really create many great openings. And to give Stoke 3 points there and not really test them a great deal in front of goal, that's going to be a really frustrating day for them because that now opens the gap up to 4 again, albeit having watched Millwall in midweek, they're certainly not out of it. I do feel that they will see that as a missed opportunity. For Bristol City, brilliant against Southampton, very good at Borough, but you just don't know what you're going to get. And to be fair, they've had a horrid run of games, even before that, Forest in the Cup, then Leeds, Coventry prior as well. I mean, it's not been an easy spell, and Liam Manning's side are starting to create chances, are starting to look a threat, playing a very different way to what Liam Manning's sides traditionally will. And again, maybe he's adapting to just try and get through to the summer. From a Luton point of view, got to say it's great to see Harry Cornick starting to get the love now. He's made some big impacts in recent games and got another goal off the bench there. And Sam Bell's starting to look a bit of a superstar too. So for me, I think it will be a close game. I can actually see Bristol City trying to give up possession a bit, despite Liam Manning's normal style. I don't think it's going to be the best game in the world, but I am going to predict a few goals, maybe a couple of them to come late on in the game, and Bristol City to edge it by 2-1. I know a big risk for a team that unpredictable. Let's move on next to the Battle of the H's and an important game in both races in the Championship. It is Huddersfield Town versus Hull City. Huddersfield won 1-0 at home to Sunderland, as we mentioned. Matty Pearson must be the most potent defender in the Championship. I mean, we know how good he was in the air from his time at Luton, but Darren Moore will be wishing he'd been fit more when he was at the club. because again, one hell of an impact from him. But Huddersfield doing really well the last few weeks. And again, giving up the ball at times against Sunderland, but working it to their advantage on the counter. For Hull, a massive comeback win against Rotherham to make it 3 from 4 in the Championship. Important they bounced back from that disappointment against Swansea, and 2 goals in 5 minutes in the second half were enough to do that. I think a lot of people have talked about Philogene goal because, of course, it was the ridiculous Rabona. Took a slight deflection and the defender wasn't doing much, but really great skill. Sat a couple of people down. I mean, if Hull don't come up, then we all know he's going to be going for a very big move this summer. But Hull will be able to buy a whole squad with the money they'll get for him the way they're going. A superb talent who is key to Hull's chances at the minute. We mentioned they had a very good January when it came to signings, and while they're not brilliant at the moment, it's not what you've got to do at this stage of the season. It's about getting results in those tight games, and 3 times out of the last 4 they have. Again, they're playing against the side at that bottom end of the table who are sitting behind the ball and scrapping for their lives, and that doesn't really help Hull the way they play. They like to counter at speed against sides that are coming at them. And that's why we've generally seen them do a little better against the top half teams. But for this one, I do feel that Huddersfield will give up a lot of the ball. It's going to come down to how Hull defend set pieces and whether they can actually mark Matty Pearson. But going forward, they've got some magic in there. And I'm going to bank on them to just get 1. I don't think this is going to be a good game. I'm going to go for Hull to nick it by 1-0. Next up, 2 of the pre-season promotion favourites go head-to-head. But it's not that way at the moment on the table. It is top of the top half Leicester versus top of the bottom half Middlesbrough. And Leicester City very much the favourites here. 5 wins in a row in all competitions, 4 on the bounce in the Championship. And against Sheffield Wednesday, very routine, very regulation. Job done at half-time. Not the most comfortable performance. They had a lot of the ball. They should have put them out of sight with a couple of their chances. But in the end, Sheffield Wednesday did have a few opportunities on the break and maybe could have given them a scare. As it is though, Middlesbrough well out of form now. No wins in the last 5 in all competitions. In the last 4 games in the Championship, just 2 points picked up. And another defeat this time at Preston. Vinazaz had a couple of other chances he missed, did get one in the end. I mean, I was going to go on about how they dominated the game and could have got something out of it, but it's what happens to every team against Preston, so I wouldn't get too bogged down. The big problem for Borough is not hitting the target. 20 shots, only 4 of them on target. I mean, it's been a story for some time. We've talked about a few of the players that have missed opportunities, and they're just lacking that potent threat that they had last year in the form of Archer and in the form of Akpom. As a result of that, and with Leicester not quite being at their best the last 2 matches, I can see this being quite a tight game in terms of play, but I just think Leicester are too potent. They've got too much ruthlessness in front of goal, and someone will pop up with a winner. So Leicester 2, Middlesbrough 1 for me. But Borough, a goal scorer away from being very competitive for the top 6. Next up, we move on to Millwall versus Sheffield Wednesday. This is a huge game at the bottom. And if Sheffield Wednesday can win it, my word, will things start to get squeaky, because then them and QPR both 4 points off Millwall. I did watch Millwall Ipswich on Wednesday night. Millwall were appalling, I've got to be honest. I mentioned it on the day. How they think Alan Campbell's not good enough to get into that team, from a Luton point of view, I don't know. I know he's got a certain style of play he wants to go for, but they're not playing that way at the minute. So get your best players in there, get people who can track runners. And show a bit of combativeness defensively, because they were carved open at will. They were done with headers in the box, which you never associate with a Millwall side. And on a side note, it was quite interesting to see Gary Rowett trying not to look smug in the Sky studio. I'm not sure he was doing a great job of that. But it was such a comfortable win for Ipswich. And I've got to be honest, I'm very worried for Millwall after that. They did have an opportunity to get one, but defensively, just not good enough. And it's been a story quite a lot in recent weeks. They've not got a consistent threat in front of goal, and they're conceding lots of goals. It is an awful combination for them. With 31 scored, 5th lowest in the division, only the bottom 3 and Stoke just behind them. For Sheffield Wednesday, regulation defeat against Leicester, but they were really decent against Birmingham the Friday night before. We know under Danny Roll they've been much better at home, but they have produced the odd little 1-0 away win that's been special. For me, I feel Millwall will have to get something out of this. I think you will see changes to the team now as well. I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline. I'm going to play safe. I feel Millwall have to avoid defeat, and just about they perhaps will, but don't be shocked if Wednesday nick this. Let's head over to East Anglia for the next one. It is Norwich City versus Cardiff City. Norwich with a big 4-2 win against Watford, having blown a 2-goal lead initially. very good going forward, but as we've mentioned, defensive frailty is very much a part of their season. Now they've got their star attacking players back, they can generally override that. Josh Sargent again scoring as he always does. Ashley Barnes playing a really important role and others getting involved from midfield too. But you've got to be worried defensively about them. I know the way they fly the fullbacks forward, they are a little bit susceptible on the break. And to be fair, they've not really got many natural sitting midfielders there. But really good effort to get back up in that playoff mix. And after a few poor performances defensively, and after only a month ago in that FA Cup tie against Bristol Rovers, people wanting the manager out, they really have bounced back and produced entertaining football. For Cardiff, that good start, unfortunately, is very much dwindling now. The goals have dried up. They're conceding goals for fun. Yes, they've largely had tough trips away, but against West Brom, they didn't really get into the game too much, to be honest. Just one shot on target, no real creativity. And of course, we mentioned this in the pre-season predictions. They've got a really decent team on paper at their best, and obviously the additions of people like Horvath make a difference there. And Bowler as well being one, but have they got enough when there's a few injuries? Well, it was good to see Aaron Ramsey back off the bench and a couple of others getting involved as well, but still a little bit of a worry for me, and I do feel they're going to keep sliding now. For this game, I have to go for a Norwich win, and even though they concede goals for fun, they've not kept a clean sheet since the West Brom game, I do have to go for Norwich by 2-0 because, one, that's the score Cardiff keep losing by, and two, they're so poor defensively at the minute, you just can't see them not letting in more than one. On to the final four, and it's a big game up in Lancashire. It is Preston North End versus Blackburn Rovers at Deepdale. Preston have made it 3 wins in a row. I mean, every game, I don't want to keep going on about it, but seriously, they give up the ball, they give up hundreds of chances, they don't have many opportunities themselves, but maybe we have to look at this the other way and give huge credits to their attacking players because they get given so few chances in a match. They get through so much work off the ball and they've been incredibly clinical at times. So massive credit to the Preston attacking players for taking those chances and working so hard. And you've got to be fair to Ryan Lowe. While it's not the best to watch, while they never dominate a game, as we always say, he's got them level on points with the playoffs against sides with far superior budgets who have added a lot of quality in January. He's doing a terrific job if you look at it on paper. So Preston, great win for them against Middlesbrough. And then looking at the other side for Blackburn, disappointment for John Eustace, wasn't it? Enjoyed Saturday with the watching brief, but didn't really get going against Birmingham. You can perhaps see why he had a poorer away record at Birmingham City. Albeit they did have one clear-cut chance to nick a draw and look slightly more disciplined and better in their defensive shape than previous weeks. It was still a defeat and it puts them in a little bit of trouble again, with just 7 points separating them from the relegation zone. But for this one, look, Preston have got a pretty good record in this fixture generally, but I don't know what to go for. So for the third time today, I'm sitting on the fence with the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. As we move on to the final game, and you've got to think last chance saloon for Rotherham United against Watford. Rotherham, after being 1-0 ahead for so long, lost 2-1 against Hull. That magical goal followed up by conceding a quick second. And to be fair, it's the story of the season for those sides at the bottom, which is just conceding clumps of goals, not just letting in one, but then letting in 2 or 3 in quick succession. And for Rotherham, a slightly better performance going forward, but gifted loads of chances to Hull. They're just not looking quite good enough at the minute, it's a shame to say. But this is an opportunity because Watford, not won in their last 6, lost 4 in a row in all competitions. Again, quite often against top level opposition. The last time they played a side near the bottom was Sheffield Wednesday. That was a 0-0 draw away from home. Watford not been great on the road all season, and that defensive solidity and that fighting spirit we've seen at times this year, maybe just drying up a bit now. They weren't terrible against Leicester, and to be fair, they did fight back from 2 down against Norwich, but then maybe thought the job was done, just threw it away again. Really poor there, despite having a lot of the ball. And it's all just going off the boil a little bit now. And with 7 points adrift from the playoffs, they've probably got to start picking up wins. I can actually see this being a pretty poor game because Rotherham will hand Watford the ascendancy. They're going to try and play on the break. But Watford have got to break down this deep defending Rotherham team. And at times they've struggled to do that this year. So I'm going to go for a 0-0 draw. I'm going to be bold with this one. There's not many teams I've got to not score this weekend. So let's throw in a crazy scoreline. Rotherham 0, Watford 0. As the penultimate game is another big one at both ends of the table. A huge win for Stoke City, but can they back it up at home to Coventry City? Well, let's preview the game and give our prediction, because for Stoke, a 1-0 win at home to QPR, where, as we mentioned earlier in the other section, they restricted QPR to next to nothing. And we've got to be fair here with Steven Schumacher. A lot of their performances have not been terrible. Okay, the last couple of weeks have been very poor, and they've started to slip away a little bit. But generally speaking, Stoke haven't been terrible under him. It's all gone a little bit wrong defensively, though, and they've had a very fragile underbelly. But against QPR, the clean sheet, probably almost as important as the win. It sends them 6 clear of the relegation zone, puts a couple of sides in between them again, and maybe things can just start to look up for him. So a really crucial win in any circumstance, but a 1-0 and to restrict the opposition to next to nothing, probably a bit of a confidence builder. They will have to defend well against Coventry, though, who, as always against Plymouth, created bundles of chances. As always, were better in the second half. Both of their goals in the second period again, and go into the end with a 96th minute equaliser. After big wins against Millwall, against Wednesday in the Cup, they've had a really decent few weeks despite that defeat at Norwich. And to be fair, while they've maybe not quite got the points to show for it they would like, they're still in that 6th place. They've got the best goal difference of those teams on 48. And they'll see this as a winnable game. Stoke have been so poor in front of goal this season. They've not scored many at home, and that includes the 4 on the opening day they picked up. So I'm going to have to go for Coventry to nick it. I know they've not been the most convincing on the road in recent times. A lot of draws and narrow defeats, but away to Stoke, they've had one big win. Can they deliver it twice in 3 days? Well, recent history at least, would tell us probably not. So I'm going to go for them to go back to losing ways in this one, albeit narrowly. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Coventry City. And the final game is Swansea City versus Ipswich Town. The story of the 4-0s in midweek. Swansea beaten 4-0 by Leeds, who just played them off the park from the very first minute. A fast start which Swansea couldn't cope with. Tactically a bit naive. Reminded me a little bit of the Bournemouth Cup tie in the way they set out and tried to play out. Leeds were just harrying them. They caught them on the counter and they tore them apart. Let's be perfectly honest about it. On the flip side of that, after a few very poor performances and certainly poor results, Ipswich against tame opposition in Millwall were fantastic. They were solid defensively to deal with a barrage of set pieces in the first 10 to 15 minutes, and then after that, they just carved Millwall open at will on the counter. They had a threat in the box, Kiefer Moore looking a really good focal point following that George Hurst injury. The likes of Broadhead showing a threat on the counter, Wes Burns looking really good as well. And a big moment for Al Hamadi with that late penalty. Probably was outside the box, the foul, but nice for him to get off the mark in the league. I think this is going to be a really interesting game. If Swansea try and play out the way they do, Ipswich will catch them out, they'll press high and they'll get them. But we know Ipswich away from home, they play a little bit more cautiously generally. They do like to play a bit more defensively sound. I think they're going to win this one though. They look like they've found a bit of form again. They've had a little wobble, they dropped off for a few weeks. But I think we're going to get back-to-back wins and back-to-back clean sheets for Ipswich. It'll keep the pressure on the top 3. I'm going for a 2-0 win for the visitors. So with that out the way, let's go and have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. After a high-scoring affair in midweek, I've only gone for one team to score 3 this weekend, that being Leeds United away at Plymouth. I've also gone for a surprise in the top 4 with Southampton to lose away at West Brom. And at the bottom, we've gone for some pretty big scorelines. Sheffield Wednesday to fail to close the gap to Millwall with a 1-1 draw on the road there. And QPR to be defeated to maybe just open up the gap to the bottom 4 again. But those are just my predictions for Matchday 33. Do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, get involved. Give me your predictions. If you beat or match my score, you'll get a shout out in Sunday's recap. As we look ahead to the 4 rearranged games on Tuesday, we'll also then have a full midweek preview later in the week as well. A Luton special on Tuesday, it's all happening. So if you did enjoy this one, please do put a thumbs up on it, subscribe and turn that notification bell on, stay up to date with everything. Thank you again to HelloFresh UK for the support. I'm going to Leyton Orient versus Burton this weekend. You'll see some clips from that one on the channel too. But thank you very much for watching. Your support is massively appreciated as always. We had our Premier League preview yesterday. That's up in the eye above. And we'll be back here on Sunday for more Championship predictions from the Honest Football Podcast.